Hey everyone, and welcome back to ABA Chapter Chat. We're taking a deep dive today into token economies.
Absolutely. One of the most powerful and fascinating tools we have.
I think a lot of our listeners are probably interested in learning more about implementing token economies.
Or even if they're just curious about this powerful tool for behavior modification.
Right.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're working with a teenager, let's say, a 14-year-old girl.
Okay.
We'll call her Sammy. And she's in a residential treatment program where they use a token economy to kind of help encourage more pro-social behaviors.
I see.
So in Sammy's case, she could earn points or tokens for doing things like getting ready on time.
Right.
Or attending her therapy sessions.
Yeah, so it's like a reward system, but with a little more structure and a focus on clear goals.
Exactly. And then she can exchange those points for things that she finds rewarding, like extra video game time or maybe going on a special outing.
We call those backup reinforcers, and they can really be anything as long as they're motivating for that specific individual.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's not just about earning points. It's about working towards something that is truly rewarding for them.
Exactly.
I'm curious, though, what are some examples of those tokens? I mean, we've been talking about points.
Sure.
But is there anything else that could be used as a token?
Oh, absolutely. You could use poker chips, stickers, marbles.
Marbles.
Even, yeah. Some programs use things like puzzle pieces, so when they earn enough pieces, they can put together a cool picture.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so creative. So you could really tailor it to each person's interests.
Yeah. The possibilities are really endless.
I like that. Now, you mentioned backup reinforcers should be motivating for the individual. So how do you figure out what those are?
Well, that's a great question, and it's really important to get that right. So you might ask Sammy directly,
Okay.
what are some things you really enjoy? Or what would make you feel good about accomplishing your goals? You also want to consider what's lacking in her current environment.
Oh, that's smart.
Maybe she doesn't get much access to video games outside of the program, so that would be a powerful reinforcer.
So it's about finding something that's desirable, but maybe not readily available all the time.
Exactly. And limiting access to those things outside of the token economy actually makes them more valuable and a stronger incentive.
That's a great point. So let's say we figured out what motivates Sammy. We've got these cool tokens and a list of awesome backup reinforcers.
All right.
How do we actually put this token economy into action?
Well, I always say, think of it like building a house, you need a solid foundation. And step one is defining those target behaviors.
Okay.
What exactly do we want to see Sammy doing more of?
Right. Got it.
And we need to be specific. Be respectful is too vague, but say please and thank you. That's much clearer and easier to measure.
Yes, something observable and measurable.
Exactly.
So everyone knows exactly what's expected. Okay.
Right.
So we've defined those target behaviors. What's next?
Then you choose your tokens. We already brainstormed some fun options, but the key is picking something that works well for your setting and for Sammy.
Got it.
Then you pick those motivating backup reinforcers.
All right. So we know the behaviors, the tokens, the rewards. But what about the how? How does Sammy earn the tokens? Is it like every time she does something good?
That's a great question, and that brings us to reinforcement schedules. At first, you might use what we call continuous reinforcement.
Okay.
So every time Sammy says please or thank you, she gets a token.
Oh, I see.
This helps her quickly see the connection between her behavior and the reward.
So we're solidifying that connection early on.
Exactly. But as she starts to get it, you can shift to an intermittent schedule. So maybe give her a token for every other time she does the behavior.
Oh, so not every single time.
Right. And actually, believe it or not, that makes the behavior last longer.
Really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. When you get a token every time, it's predictable. But when the reinforcement is unpredictable, she has to work for it. And that makes her more likely to continue, even if she's not sure if she'll get a token that time.
It's like a little element of surprise.
Exactly. It keeps her motivated.
That's interesting. So continuous reinforcement is like the training wheels.
Yes.
And intermittent is like riding the bike on her own.
Right.
But are there different kinds of intermittent reinforcement?
Oh, yeah, there are.
Or is it all just random?
Oh, no. There are actually very specific types, and they each have a unique effect on behavior. You've got fixed ratio schedules where a reward is given after a certain number of responses, like every 3 times Sammy says thank you.
Okay.
Then there are variable ratio schedules where the number of responses for a reward changes. It's unpredictable. And then you have interval schedules that are based on time, not the number of responses. It can get pretty complex, but the main thing is to understand how to use them effectively.
Wow, so much more to this than I realized. So we've got behaviors, tokens, reinforcers, and these really cool reinforcement schedules. What else do we need to get this running?
Well, next, you have to think about a fair exchange rate. How many tokens does Sammy need to buy a reward? It shouldn't be too easy or too hard. You want her to be successful, but also challenged.
So find that sweet spot where she's motivated, but not getting discouraged.
Exactly. And finally, you need to decide on a consistent time and place for the token exchange.
Oh, like a
Yeah.
weekly store.
Yeah, a store where she can buy rewards.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's like her own little economy.
Right.
Okay, but what happens when she messes up or doesn't quite do the right thing?
Right. Good question. That's where we get to response cost. Basically the opposite of earning tokens.
Okay, so like if Sammy, let's say, swears at a staff member, she loses some tokens.
Yeah. It's a way to decrease those unwanted behaviors by taking those tokens away. But it's important to know that it's optional. You don't have to use it. It can actually backfire if you use it too harshly.
So be careful with that.
Right. If you do use it, be careful. You don't want Sammy to lose too many tokens and feel like she can never get the rewards.
Yeah.
It should always be encouraging.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, wow, we've covered so much already. The token economy, how to set it up, these different types of reinforcement schedules. We even touched on response cost.
It's a lot.
I'm starting to realize how much goes into a successful token economy.
Right. And you know what? We've really only just scratched the surface.
Oh,
There are so many ways they're used in the real world, and I think you'll find it fascinating.
okay, now I'm even more curious. I think we need to take a break and come back to all these real-world examples. I bet they're really interesting.
It's fascinating to think about how token economies aren't just for, settings like Sammy's. They're used with all kinds of people, like,
Yeah.
kids with ADHD or even adults in prison.
Oh, yeah. Now that you mention it, I do remember hearing about them being used in classrooms when I was younger. But prison, that's a very different environment, isn't it?
It might seem surprising, yeah, but it makes sense when you think about it. They can be really helpful for encouraging positive behavior, like following the rules and routines, participating in programs.
So it's not just about like reducing those problem behaviors.
Right.
It's also about encouraging those pro-social behaviors that can like improve the environment for everyone.
Exactly. And the research shows, that they can actually work. They've been shown to reduce rule violations and improve behavior overall.
That's really interesting. It sounds like it could be a really valuable tool in that kind of challenging setting.
Definitely.
You mentioned kids with ADHD earlier. How are token economies used with them?
Well, imagine a child who's having trouble focusing in school.
Right.
A token economy can be set up to reward them for things like staying on task and completing their work, participating in class.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is that studies have actually shown that in some cases, this type of reinforcement can be just as effective as medication for reducing hyperactivity.
Really? Wow. So for some kids, it could be a possible alternative to medication.
Yeah.
Or even used together with medication to, further help them focus.
Exactly. And, one of the best parts is that it can be individualized.
Oh.
You're really working with that child's needs and interests to make it motivating for them.
Right. It's not one size fits all.
Right.
Which is important for any ABA intervention.
Yeah.
So we've talked about schools and prisons. What about other places they're being used successfully?
Okay, so get this, minors. There was this study, it lasted a decade. They used a token economy in open pit mines.
Minors. I would never have thought of that. What were they trying to improve? And how do they even, do it in that kind of environment?
Well, it is pretty incredible. They were really focused on safety behaviors, like wearing the right gear, following procedures, reporting any hazards. And the miners earned tokens for doing these things, which they could then trade for, things like gift certificates or extra break time or even company merchandise.
So they made the rewards relevant to their lives.
Yeah, exactly.
But did it actually work? Did it improve safety?
The results were amazing. The number of injuries went down significantly over the 10 years. And the company ended up saving a lot of money because there were fewer accidents and less downtime.
Wow, it's a powerful example of how they can not only change individual behavior, but also make a real difference for a whole organization.
It really does.
So we have minors, kids with ADHD, people in prison. It seems like token economies can be applied pretty much anywhere, right?
You got it. And that is one of the most exciting things about them. They're super flexible. You can adjust them to all kinds of different populations and settings. The key is really understanding how reinforcement works and, getting creative.
It's amazing how one idea can be used in so many ways to help people make changes. But we've been focusing on, setting up a token economy. But what happens when it's time to stop?
That's a great question. It's a really important concept in ABA that we call fading. The token economy is this kind of artificial system to get things going. But what we really want is for those behaviors to stick around even without the tokens.
So it's like you put training wheels on a bike,
Yes,
but eventually you take them off when the person can ride on their own.
exactly. And that's what fading is all about, gradually removing those supports and switching over to more natural reinforcers.
So how do you fade a token economy? Do you just stop giving tokens?
It's not quite that simple. It has to be done carefully so those good behaviors continue. You might do things like gradually increasing the number of behaviors it takes to earn a token, or maybe you make the reward a little harder to get, or you start giving more social praise along with the tokens.
So we're like weaning them off the tokens.
Yeah.
And onto rewards that come naturally, like feeling proud of themselves or getting positive feedback from other people.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that fading takes time. You need to be patient and watch how the person is doing and be ready to adjust as needed.
It sounds like it requires a lot of observation and adjusting along the way.
Yeah, you're right. Every person's different.
Right.
Some might transition easily. Others might need more time and support. Sometimes you even have to go back and change things if you see those good behaviors starting to drop off.
That makes sense. Fading is a great example of how individualization is so important in ABA. It's about finding what works for each person and realizing there's no one right way to do it.
You're exactly right. And that's why it's so important for ABA professionals to really understand these principles and to keep learning about the best ways to do things.
It sounds like fading is just as important as the token economy itself. It's not just about change in the short term. It's about making those changes last.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what makes ABA so rewarding. You get to see people make progress and achieve things they might not have thought possible.
It's so interesting to think about how we can use these principles with, individuals, but also with larger groups, like a whole classroom or workplace.
Yeah, it really shows how flexible token economies can be. But like we talked about, we don't want people relying on those tokens forever.
Right. That brings us back to fading. And I imagine fading a token economy can be pretty tricky.
It definitely can be. It takes a lot of thought and, really understanding the people you're working with.
So it's more than just taking the tokens away. You have to think about those natural reinforcers and how to make that shift smoothly.
Exactly. There are different strategies you can use, but what works best really depends on the situation.
Right, of course.
You might start by slowly increasing the number of tokens it takes to get a reward. Or maybe you make the rewards a bit less exciting or less frequent.
Oh, I see.
So if Sammy was getting a token for every please and thank you before,
Yeah.
you might start giving her a token for, say, every 3 polite phrases.
Right, got it.
Or you could start giving smaller rewards or make her wait a little longer before she can trade in her tokens.
I see. So we're gradually making it a little harder, but those positive behaviors are still being reinforced.
Exactly.
I can see how you would really need to pay attention to how the person is responding and make changes as needed.
Absolutely. It's not a perfect science. Some people will adjust really easily. Others might need more time and support. And, sometimes you might have to go back and rethink your approach if things aren't working.
That makes sense. Fading is a good example of how you really need to individualize things in ABA. Find what works best for each person.
Exactly. There's no one right way to do it.
Right. So important. Fading seems just as important as setting up the token economy to begin with. It's not just about changing behavior for now, it's about making it last.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's all about lasting change. And that's what's so great about ABA. Seeing people make progress and achieve things they might not have thought possible.
It's been so fascinating to learn about token economies. We've covered so much, how they work, setting them up, making them effective with those reinforcement schedules, and fading them out correctly.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
I feel like I have a whole new set of tools to think about.
Oh, that's great to hear. And remember, this is really just the start. There's always more to learn.
Very true. So, to all our listeners out there, keep learning and exploring ABA. There are so many ways to learn: books, workshops, talking to other professionals. Never stop learning.
That's great advice.
Well, this has been another amazing episode of ABA Chapter Chat. We hope you've enjoyed learning about token economies and that you feel like you can use what you've learned to make a difference in your own life or the lives of others.
It's been a pleasure. Keep learning, keep growing, and until next time.
Bye, everyone.